Daryl Morey is at a nearly flawless offseason, adding a ton of significant pieces, but is still looking to round out the roster to give Nick Nurse the optimum chance to build a championship contender. They've been linked to Marcus Morris, who's a familiar face within the Sixers organization, as well as a new name that has entered the conversation in Bertans. In this video, I want to talk a little bit about the potential fit of each of these players, who I think would be best served for that final roster spot that we're essentially talking about at this point in time, because as we mentioned, while there's just 13 players signed currently, Daryl Morey's been very open about wanting to keep one roster spot open for flexibility. So essentially, we are gauging through and trying to figure out who that best fit for that 14th spot is, and we do know the weakness at power forward, which both of these players check that box for. So I want to go about the pros and cons of each of their games, how I see their fit, and if I do think that would be the right decision for this final roster spot. But before I fully get into that, I do want to take a quick break to take a word from our sponsor, and we'll be right back on the other side.
And while these Sixers have to put their hands together and pray that their star players can be healthy for the playoffs and give this team a chance, you are in control of preventing any crippling damage that could be occurring to your computer and other devices. The best way to do this is by utilizing NordVPN and clicking the link in the description to this video. Whether it is the risk of free public Wi-Fi, phishing scams, password attacks, ransomware, malware, or whatever next tactic is up hackers' sleeve, it is important to be one step ahead. A VPN stands for a virtual protective network, which masks your IP address and prevents anyone who shouldn't have access to your data from having it. But what's different about NordVPN is its trademark Threat Protection Pro and advanced dark web monitoring. So whether you're a frequent user of your local coffee shop's shady Wi-Fi, constantly getting emails that you can't tell are legit, or use the same password for every platform, NordVPN is the best way to make sure you're covered. With robust encryption, 24/7 customer support, and up to 10 devices being able to be protected under the same account, NordVPN is a full-service experience with the mission to make the internet a better place. So click the link below for access to an exclusive offer from us here at Sixers Digest for 4 months of additional services, along with Nord's risk-free 30-day money-back guarantee.
So not a surprise to see Marcus Morris's name enter the conversation. I think this is a guy that we've talked about for a little bit, and there's been a lot of speculation. He obviously was traded to the Sixers just last year in that James Harden trade, along with Nico Batum, KJ Martin, and Robert Covington there, and the draft picks that, of course, came with it. And I think a lot of us were pleasantly surprised to see what Morris still had left in the tank. He's obviously a local Philly kid, a guy who truly represents the city in a way I think as good as any athlete that I've seen, and I will touch a little bit deeper on that. But we did get the report from Keith Pompey of the Philadelphia Inquirer that writes that the Sixers remain interested in in signing Marcus Morris Sr. Although the Cleveland Cavaliers are, quote, highly interested in re-signing the 34-year-old veteran, quote, the Sixers only have a one-year veteran's minimum salary of $3.3 million available to offer him. Sources say the Cavs, who are highly interested, are prepared to give Morris nearly double that money. Now, I do think Morris would be interested in potentially returning on a cheaper deal. We do know a lot about how much it meant to him to represent the city, a guy who received the key to Philadelphia during his brief time with the Sixers last year, and it was unfortunate for him that he was sent away at the trade deadline in the deal that eventually brought in Buddy Hield. He ended up bouncing around for a little bit and landed with the Cleveland Cavaliers, and by the way, looked pretty strong in the playoffs. After Donovan Mitchell went down, he looked like the Cavs' best source of offense in that final game of elimination at the hands of the Boston Celtics, and I was kind of impressed overall with what he had left in the tank. Now, the stats don't tell the full story here, but as far as last year for Morris, averaged 6.4 points per game and 2.7 rebounds, still shot 40.3% from 3, and anything over 40% from 3, you can sign me up in my book. Shot 42.9% from the corner. He is real deal 6'8", and beyond that, there is this grittiness, this toughness that I do think he brings that's very important. He's not a guy that I would particularly a very strong defender, but he is competitive. He does have some real deal strength from him, and I don't think he would be the cure to their rebounding issue, but he is a guy that I think would be a better option than a lot of these Sixers' current situations. And when I mentioned how important it was for him to be home, he did acknowledge that on the article as well, and it was written that, quote, being home, I just felt so free. I just felt so much love. So it's like, yeah, man, I would definitely entertain coming back. I just hope we can get something going, hopefully. No love lost if we can. So with that being said, I do think the likely situation is if the Sixers want to hand him that veteran's minimum, Marcus Morris will sign on the dotted lines right away. That as much as, sure, money's important, at this point in his career, at 34 years old, I think this is a guy who would prioritize staying home, representing Philadelphia, and he is a guy who truly is the lifeblood to the city. We also got this picture circulating out there of him already working out with Ricky Council IV, along with his brother Markieff and legendary Philly Hoops trainer Chuck Ellis, shout out. My guess is these are probably these guys training up for the Rump Classic. By the way, I will be in attendance for a number of the games this weekend out there at the Rump Classic. If you guys are stopping by, feel free to say what's up. But my expectation is probably Ricky Council IV is playing on the Twins team there. These are guys that participate this on a year in and year out basis. Really cool story, kind of a charity foundation for Danny Rump, who died unfortunately from a heart disease there. And they want to spread awareness with all those type of things and provide some good hoops in the process. Really cool event that both the Morris twins play in just about every year. Last year, Tyrese Maxey played in it. Isaiah Joe's played in it. Paul Reed's played in it. There's been a number of Sixers and NBA players as a whole that have played in this, and I do think Ricky Council is going to be making his debut this year. Who knows? Who else we will see? There's always a ton of Philly and just local area guys that do show up through that, but that's my expectation, not more than the training situation there. But the bottom line is Morris is still a guy that could help this Sixers team. And when you do look at the depth chart for the Sixers overall, you can still see the need at power forward. The guard spots are pretty locked down. It's Tyrese Maxey, Kyle Lowry, Reggie Jackson, and Jeff Doughton Jr. on a two-way who might get a little bit of burn there. At shooting guard, Kelly Oubre, Eric Gordon, and Jared McCain. Then you look at these small forward spots, Paul George, Ricky Council IV, who I think might be more power forward if you want to get technical there, but whatever. Justin Edwards on a two-way could see some minutes potentially as well. Power forward, Caleb Martin, KJ Martin, both players I like, but I don't see any real world in which those are your ideal power forwards in every situation. Could definitely use a plus rebounder there, and Morris is certainly a guy with a little bit more size. And then at the big man spot, Joel Embiid, Andre Drummond, and Adem Bona there. 2 NBA roster spots remaining, but as I mentioned, that Daryl Morey does want to keep one of those options available for flexibility throughout the season. But it was not just Marcus Morris that it was revealed in this particular article, that it was also a new name to the conversation that we had not heard yet, and that being Davis Bertans. So written in that article as well was that the Sixers are interested in signing Davis Bertans with their veterans minimum contract per Keith Pompey. Quote, according to sources, the 6'10 sharpshooter Davis Bertans is another player that they're interested in acquiring. So a guy that, once again, we're a little bit more unfamiliar with. He's had a bizarre career trajectory. He looked like an up-and-coming rising star as a shooter, a guy that could do a lot of great things from a role player perspective, could shoot off movement, can run off pin downs, great size at 6'10", and some of those, like when he was at his best of just sprinting around the perimeter and be able to get off a three at rapid-fire pace, looked really impressive. But he kind of has phased his way out as his career has gone on, become a bit of a journeyman, and has not been able to grab a foothold in any real rotational minutes in a couple years at this point, or I should say real rotational minutes that matter on a winning team. So I'm very curious what he has left in the tank, but for the Sixers specifically, and let's take a look at the stats here for what he's bringing. We're talking about for Davis Bertans, we're talking about 6.7 points and 1.4 rebounds. Shot just 38% from 3 last year, which is a little bit of a down year for him, 39.3% from the field overall. And the biggest stat that I want to highlight with him is right at the bottom there, 85.5% of his shots are from beyond the three-point arc. That's going to be what makes or breaks his impact. He's either going to knock down some big-time shots from deep, or he's not really going to do too much. That he is a guy that is still considered a negative defender. While he is 6'10", and I do see some competitiveness from him, I don't think it's a lack of effort type thing. He's just a guy that can get bullied or can get lost. And while Morris is certainly no defensive player of the year candidate, a guy that I would consider definitely the better defender out of the two options here. Bertans does have a little additional size, but not a guy that's a huge plus rebounder either. I probably would get that edge to Morris as well. And there is kind of a toughness factor that I'm kind of more into on Marcus Morris. Bertans is pretty much make or break with the shot, and while for years I've kind of hampered down on this point that I think shooting is everything when building a team around Joel Embiid, the need for that has come down a little bit now that Tyrese Maxey is the caliber of shooter that he is, and Paul George is going to be a high-level catch-and-shoot candidate for him. And just kind of to give the full picture for what these guys can bring to the table, to touch on Tyrese Maxey from a shooting perspective, 37.3% from 3 last year, which is a down year from him when you compare that to the past couple seasons. Shot 61% from the corner, which is absurd there. And then Paul George, 41.3% from 3 overall. So you can see that these guys are going to be able to carry that torch a little bit. And I also will note that these Sixers are not alone in the bidding for either of these guys. That we're kind of at the portion of the offseason where a lot of teams are waiting at each other to see where the chips fall and where these players end up. But we also got this acknowledgement in the article saying that Pompey also stated that several teams are in the mix for Morris: the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Charlotte Hornets, the Detroit Pistons, Miami Heat, New Orleans Pelicans, and Minnesota Timberwolves. At this point, Morris has proven to be a capable shooter, but won't provide much else outside of offense. If they're looking for a floor-spacing power forward, he's a solid option that proves he could play and thrive within Nick Nurse's system. Bertans, on the other hand, is a newer name. Bertans has bounced around the NBA after inking a massive deal with the Washington Wizards in 2020. Much like Morris, he doesn't give teams much outside of shooting, but definitely brings a bit more size at a 6'10" frame. I'd also argue Bertans is more of a quick trigger perimeter shooter than Morris. Theoretically, he'd be a good fit alongside any of these Sixers' big rotation as a floor spacer. So great stuff from Harrison Grimm breaking that down there. I think pretty spot on and everything. The only thing that I will add is Morris is not a guy that's scared to put up the contested three, which I've seen from a lot of players in a Sixers uniform, and a little bit with Bertans, that it does feel like while he is quick trigger and can run off motion, which is really intriguing to me, I'm more interested in kind of developing Jared McCain and giving him those type of opportunities, because I do think he will end up being that high caliber of a shooter. I understand it might not be from year one, but I'm a little skeptical that that is as high of a need as it once was on this Sixers team. At this point in time, when looking at what the missing ingredient is on the Sixers being a championship team, I think rebounding is number one. I think Morris is a better option for this, and I even would hear out other names. Precious Achiuwa officially re-signed with the Knicks, which was my pipe dream to fit in there. Daryl Morey was also pretty open on the Rice Ricky Sanchez podcast, saying that he seemed to indicate that he expects a signing soon. And he also speculated that a lot of the names that he sees being discussed are not the ones that they are talking to. So I'm very curious how active he is on Twitter and scrolling all that. But I know Morris is a common name, so that did throw me off a little bit there. But Keith Pompey is fairly plugged in and is certainly getting this information from somewhere. I absolutely would welcome Marcus Morris back to the Sixers. He is a guy that I was impressed with for the minutes that he gave the Sixers last year. And once again, when making this direct comparison, I don't think Bertans would be a worst-case scenario. In theory, the size is great, the shooting is great. I would prefer Morris out of the two if given the choice, but we'll see if that is the decision Daryl Morey makes, or if he does keep us all guessing from here. But I do want to hear from you guys below, so make sure you're dropping your comments, your thoughts on either Davis Bertans or Marcus Morris. I think there's a pretty high likelihood that Marcus Morris does end up being the guy, but at this point, we will see. Still plenty to unfold, and we're going to break it all down for you right here on Sixers Digest. So make sure you're smashing that subscribe if you have not already, dropping a like on this video, and I'll be talking to you next time. Peace.